In every field, Jews have excelled throughout history, whether it's business, politics, entrepreneurship, innovation, every field, Jews have outranked all of their peers. But in one department, Jews have been pathetic, extraordinarily lacking in their ability to stand up and protect themselves. Recent events have shown a group, a large group of Jews who simply are incapable of standing up for themselves, choosing rather to support those who are trying to hurt them, those who don't believe in the right of the Jewish people to exist. Listen to Israel's special envoy for trade and innovation. It's Fleur Hassan-Nahoum talk about this group of Jewish people.
Let me ask you something. What does it mean to be a Jew today? Is it just bagels on Sunday and menorah on Hanukkah? Or is it knowing deep in your bones that we are a part of a story far older than America, older than the Enlightenment, older than socialism, liberalism, or whatever moral fashion is trending this year? Because some of you, my fellow Jews, seem to have forgotten that story. Or worse, you've betrayed it. You organize protests against the only Jewish state. You protest Israel's lawful attack against Iran, a bloodthirsty regime that threatens to wipe the one Jewish state off the map. You shout slogans fed to you by genocidal regimes. You repost Hamas propaganda while Jewish families bury their dead. You sign open letters defending those who cheer our slaughter, and you dare to call that solidarity? And what's worse, you do it as Jews, as a Jew. You wear your Jewish identity like a moral badge that gives you your betrayal some kind of gravitas. But you're not the first. Let's talk about history. In ancient Judea, when the Romans ruled, Jewish elites collaborated with the empire. They mocked the zealots, the defenders of Masada, the fighters of freedom. In the end, Jerusalem burnt and the temple fell. Their loyalty brought them nothing but destruction. In Spain, where my family comes from, in 1492, some converted Jews, the conversos, testified against their fellow Jews in the Inquisition. They thought that by becoming tools of the regime, they'd be spared. They weren't. The fire didn't care whose side they claimed to be on. Under Stalin, the Jewish section of the Communist Party, the Yevzhevskaya, worked to dismantle Jewish life in the USSR. They shut down synagogues, banned Hebrew, crushed Zionist youth groups, all in the name of progress. And when Stalin was done using them, he purged them too. You think you're different? You're not. Today, we see Jewish students marching under From the River to the Sea banners, Jewish writers twisting language to call October 7th resistance, Jewish so-called intellectuals calling out Israel and the US for attacking Iran's nuclear sites, Jewish voters casting their ballots for candidates who undermine Jewish safety? Yes, let's talk about that. Just this week, some Jewish voters in New York cast their ballots for Zohran Mamdani in the mayoral primaries. A man who has spread anti-Israel rhetoric, aligned himself with radical anti-Zionist groups, and dismissed Jewish concerns as privileged whining. And yet, he got your vote. Why? To prove you're the one of the good ones. To show you're not that kind of Jew. You handed power to someone who mocks your own people in a time of crisis. Why? Because you've confused moral posturing for moral clarity. You've absorbed the language of oppressors and turned it inward against your own family, your people, your story. You've adopted the cultural sickness of co-opting other people's pain instead of standing in your own truth. You act like we're part of the white oppressor class, erasing centuries of persecution, exile, and genocide just to gain credibility in those radical circles. You buy into the lie that Jews have white privilege, as if we were ever handed anything. We weren't born into power. We built safety where there was none. With ingenuity, resilience, and relentless work, our success didn't come from systems that favored us. It came from surviving the systems that tried to destroy us. And we don't wear victimhood like a badge, even when we have every right to. After pogroms, after exile, after the Shoah, we didn't build our identity around pain. We built it around continuity, around rising again. That's why there's an Israel, and that's why we still exist. But you're playing with fire. Do you really think that when the mobs come, they'll pause and check your voting record? That your open letter will protect you from being labeled a dirty Jew or Zionist scum? That your kafir will act as a shield? It won't. And deep down, you know it. You're not brave. You're not radical. You're just the latest iteration of the Jew who thinks if he or she turns on their people, they'll be spared. But you never are. Not by Rome, not by the Inquisition, not by the Soviets, not by the woke mobs, not by Islamists, and certainly not by Hamas. We don't need you to be a nationalist. We need you to be a Jew, a rooted one who knows that Judaism is not a costume or a conversation piece. It's a covenant. It's a bond. The indigenous people of the land of Israel, with a peoplehood also forged in exile, tested in fire, and reborn in freedom. You still have time to come back. We need all of us now, even you.
You know, common sense is really not so common. And when we look back at Jewish history as Fleur describes, we look back at the Hanukkah story, and it's interesting to note that in the Hanukkah story, when the Jews fought against the Greeks who tried to assimilate us into their culture, who tried to pull God out of Judaism and turn it to reduce it into some sort of a pathetic culture of food and wisdom, the overwhelming majority of Jews were seduced by the Hellenic culture. Only a small, tiny minority of Jews, a few tens of thousands, remained loyal. They were known as the Maccabees. The word Maccabee in Hebrew is actually an acronym for a verse in Torah, quoting from the Song of the Sea when the Jews crossed the Red Sea, which says, Mi kamocha ba'ilim Hashem, who is mighty like you, O God. That verse, who is mighty like you, O God, is the acronym of the word Maccabee, because the overwhelming majority of Jews turned their backs on God. They said, we don't need God because we've got friends in high places. We've got the Greeks, the Athenians, the sages of Athens, Socrates, Plato, and the others. These are our friends. We don't need God. And it was then in the Hanukkah story that Judaism was on the precipice of extinction, God forbid, but it was the courage of the few that managed to overwhelm the many. It was the courage of the faithful who was able to overwhelm the faithless. What happened by Yom Mahim in those days is what's happening today, Bizman Hazeh, where a small nucleus of loyal, clear Jews who understand where they're coming from and understand where they're going are not intimidated by social trends, are not intimidated by what's going on around them. But it's these Jews who have the courage of their convictions who are going to turn the tide of history. Those Jews who jumped ship never were part of the story. They were just pathetic, falling along the wayside, reduced to the dustbins of history, because it was only the Jews who were strong that forged the course of Jewish history. The very first Jew, his name was Abraham. Abraham's last name was the Hebrew, Avraham HaIvri, Abraham the Hebrew. One of the reasons that he was called Abraham the Hebrew is because the word Hebrew means the other side. The other side, because Abraham was different. Whereas in his time, everybody else was pagan, worshiping deities, worshiping idols. Only Abraham was different to the rest because he had the courage to believe in monotheism, to believe in one God, an invisible maker who was the creator of everything. And people said, Abraham, you're different. Abraham, you're weird. Abraham, you're a Hebrew. What then was a badge of disgrace and shame is today something which we carry with dignity, with pride, and with honor. We have the courage to be different, and we're proud of it. We have the pride to be able to stand up for what we believe in. Warren Buffett, the billionaire, gives advice as to how to make money. And he says, everybody else would like to buy when everybody else is buying, and they want to sell when everybody else is selling, but that's not how you make money. You need to buy when everyone else is selling, and you need to be selling when everybody else is buying, because if you can have the courage to go against the grain, that's where you're going to make your fortune. It's interesting that the Jewish people were blessed by Jacob, our forefather. Jacob blessed his two grandsons, the two grandsons that were born in the diaspora. These are the sons of Joseph, prime minister of Egypt. These two grandsons of Jacob, their names were Manasseh and Ephraim. They represent the Jewish diaspora, the Jewish people outside of the land of Israel. And the way that he blessed them in the end of the book of Genesis was that they should be like fish. And you shall multiply or be like fish amongst the land, amongst the nations of the world. What is the significance of fish? Fish have the extraordinary ability of being able to swim upstream. In fact, in the great Alaskan salmon run that happens right in the summertime of the year, it's then that the Alaskan salmon actually swim all the way back to the place that they were born, where instead of being washed downstream and going with the flow, flowing with the current, which is really easy, they rather choose to fight against impossible odds, literally jumping up waterfalls in the most spectacular display of natural ingenuity, of God's beautiful design of creation. They swim upstream until they finally come back to the place where they were born, and that's where they procreate and ultimately die. We Jews were blessed with that same ability to have the courage to stand up for what we believe in, the courage of our convictions, to go against the trend, to do what's right instead of what is popular. Friends, this is the definition of courage. It's easy to do what everybody else is doing, but it's much harder to stand up and to stand out. It's not too late for us Jews to stand up for what we believe in. If you were one of those that was trying to hide their Jewish identity, that was trying to fit in with the anti-Semites so that they won't notice us, or maybe so that they'll think that we're actually like them, it's never going to happen. Studying Jewish history has taught us that the Jews were always attacked, no matter what they believed in. Even the kapos in Nazi Germany, the kapos were the Jews who were in charge of controlling the other Jews. Even they were gassed. Even they were killed. Those Jews who were helping the Nazis, they were just killed a little bit later, but they too were killed. It's not too late. Having the courage doesn't mean the absence of fear. Courage means that you have fear, but you choose not to allow it to control you. You recognize the fear as a part of you instead of all of you. And you have the courage to do what you need to do instead of what you're feeling. Like John Wayne said, courage is not the absence of fear. He says courage is being afraid and saddling up anyways. We can do this. We can be on the right side of history. We can do what's right because history will remember us for having the courage to stand up in these times when our existence is in peril, when the world refuses to allow us the dignity of our own home. Now is the time where we need to stand up for what we believe in. What will you tell your grandchildren you were doing in 2025?